And the chair will move your bill, Representative Lee. Welcome back to our committee. Chair moves House File 3061 be re-referred to the Committee on Government Operations? Government Operations. So with that, Representative Lee, I know there's some amendments. We talked a little bit about how you wanted to proceed. And the amendments actually change the bill quite a bit. And so I'm wondering maybe you can start from point A and then move us through to the point where we can be moving your amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee member, for the opportunity to present House File 3061. Mr. Chair, House File 3061 is a bill about keeping families together and respecting the humanity and the basic rights of every person. It is about us standing up for immigrant communities and communities of color that are incarcerated based on policies of fears and criminalizations of these groups. And, just real quickly, Mr. Chair, to the original bill before moving on to the amendments. I have heard from our immigrant communities here throughout the state of Minnesota that, what are we doing with these policies where we're spending state resources to really work with the federal government to work on these policies of breaking families apart. And I feel like this is not the right route to go. And so that's why I introduced House File 3061. But after hearing from our local units of government, I thought that the best route is to really, work with them too, because they are the folks on the ground working with these communities to come up with a solution that does not prohibit local law enforcement, but actually work with law enforcement to really address some of the concerns that we heard. And I had a bill that was heard in local units of government and the subcommittee on local governments, where my testifier, who was supposed to be here today, she no longer can join us. She was talking about the treatment that her brother had faced when her brother was in a facility, a county facility that was working with immigration and customs enforcement, and the inhuman treatment that was experienced there. I just want to share, she provided a written testimony for me, and I will share it with the committee too, and just highlight some of the comments that she had. She shared that her brother only shared that when he was first being diagnosed, that he didn't want to take some of the medicines when he was in the county facility because they didn't disclose what they were giving to him. But members of the facility used riot shields to corner him and inject the medicine. And I feel like these are not the treatment that we should be providing for the folks that are in our care in the state of Minnesota. And then she went on to say that it is extremely difficult for me and my mother to either on-site video visit or at-home video visit. Firstly, it's expensive for only 20 minutes, also adding that they failed to mention that he was in solitary confinement for 23 hours of the day. And these are just, some of the examples that my testifier would have mentioned, and if members of the committee want to, they could view the video that the local government or the audio the local government committee had on February 19th to hear the full testimony from Ms. Samantha Ibarra herself. And so that's what that's where we're at right now, Mr. Chair. That's why I brought forward the 820-070 amendment, just to address some of the concerns that I heard from my testifier that evening in local government to look at what can we do with regards to providing a pathway for folks in the care of our local law enforcement to have legal representation, and at the same time to address some of these inhumane care that they have experienced or received, and really, to look at what can we give the Commissioner of Corrections the authority to do with regards to protecting the constitutional rights of the individuals that are in our care, and also to look at how do we ensure that our local law enforcement provide equal treatment for all individuals, regardless of the basis of why they were detained or the ordering authority. And, after some further consideration and further conversation with local units of government, I feel like, the best path for us right now to do is to really focus on the treatment of the folks in our care in the state of Minnesota, regardless of, their detainment status and, their documentation status, and really focus on what can we do to protect the constitutional rights of the people in our care, Mr. Chair. And so with that, I would appreciate if you can move the 820-070 amendment.
Representative Lee, the chair will move the 820-0707 amendment. And let me just comment quickly that, particularly for the public that's observing, it's quite typical for bills to be constantly amended and adjusted as we go through our process. That's what we're here for. And that process very often does and should, in fact, involve strong communications between bill authors and all the interested, impacted stakeholders. So I commend you for following that tradition in this body of constantly adjusting our bills as we learn more and as we interact with all the stakeholders that are involved. So with that, the chair moves the 820-0707 amendment, and then Representative Lee, you have an amendment to that amendment, and I believe it's the A3 amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, so the A3 amendment is the amendment that strikes the language for that mentions the per diems collected by the county and also the immigrant legal services account creation.
So the chair will move the A3 amendment to the amendment to the amendment. And then basically what this amendment will do is retain section, I'll ask for legal counsel to make sure I'm getting this correct. It retains the section 2 of the 820 amendment, which speaks to inmate constitutional rights, health, and welfare. And section 4 of the 820 amendment, which speaks to equal treatment. So it only retains those two provisions. I think that's the author's intent.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And I'll ask legal counsel just to help me make sure that I set that on the record correctly.
Mr. Chair and members, yes, the amendment deletes sections 1 and 3 and corrects internal cross-references based on those changes.
Very well. Representative Lee. Any further comments on the amendment? And then I'll open it up to member questions about the amendment itself.
I don't have any further comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Very well. Representative Mueller.
I'm sorry, wait, are we talking about just the amendment right now itself?
Yes,
Okay,
the amendment to the amendment.
okay. I think I'll pass it this time.
Okay,
Thanks.
very well. Representative Lazaro, is this to the A3 amendment? Very well. Representative Lazaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I actually have 2 or 3 questions here. So the first question is to the bill author. As I'm looking at the amendment, on line 1.7, it uses the word immigration detainees. Is there a definition for immigration detainees? And if there's not, how does your bill provide, if at all, a distinction between legal immigrants and illegal immigrants? Because this could be, I would think, potentially very broad in terms of just immigration.
Representative Lazaro, that language is being stricken by the A3 amendment. So that is not before us in discussion on the A3 amendment. It's the amendment to the amendment, sir.
I'm sorry, I'll come back then to the amendment, I guess.
Very well. Any further discussion? Representative Dean.
Mr. Chair, and maybe Mr. Debo can clarify. So as I understand the A3 amendment, almost exactly what we're left with is the current Section 2, and this, with that, as well as on page 2, I'm assuming it's going to be Section 4. Am I understanding what this amendment to the amendment does?
Mr. Debo.
Mr. Chair and members, that's correct. Section 5 is the effective date, which will be renumbered, but it'll.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Debo. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very well. Any further discussion? If not, then all in favor of the A3 amendment to the A20 amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion prevails. So Representative Lee, your bill as amended is
No,
before.
we have to
Oh, I'm
approve
sorry, I have to
820.
move the 820,
Section 1 and 3.
right.
Gone.
So, so Representative Johnson, you have an amendment
I have an
to
amendment
this
as well.
amendment as well. Very well. Representative Johnson moves adoption of the A1 amendment to the A20 amendment.
But the intent of the A1 amendment is to require our state prisons to be inspected. Many of you, a couple weeks ago, we got to go through the OLA report on the state prison system, on the safety for the staff and the inmates. It was, had a lot of concerns before that report came out, and it's more than 10 times worse than what I thought. But what surprised me was at the county jail level, they're doing the inspections every 2 years, and if there's any issues, they're doing the inspections every year. They're doing physical inspections yearly, or every other year, and policy reviews yearly. And we come to find out that the DOC is not inspecting their own facilities. They claim that the state prisons are exempt. It's right in the report. They do a little cursory review, but they don't do an actual inspection. In fact, St. Cloud had its last security audit in 2011. And in Rush City, which is in my district, it was 2013, the last security review. I believe not only for the safety of our staff, the safety of the inmates, if we did the inspections at least by every other year, we wouldn't have a report that looks this ugly. That's the intent of this amendment, to have our prisons inspected by the same teams that inspect the county for this, and at the same level of inspection, because our staff deserves it for their safety, the inmates for their safety, and to make sure things are being done right, so we don't have to go through something like this again.
Representative Johnson, the chair agrees with your call for this amendment. I do think it does align with the OLA report. I would hope, as this bill, if it goes out and it comes back, that if there's a fiscal note that accompanies this, that I can have your support to make sure that we're properly appropriating for any cost. But Representative Lee, this is your bill, so any comments on the A1 amendment?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Johnson and members. I have been in communication with the Department of Corrections. I don't know if they're here today, but they are fine with adding state correctional facilities to the amendment, the underlying amendment. So I do urge members to support the A1 amendment.
Very well. Any further discussion on the A1 amendment? If not, all in favor of the A1 amendment to the A20 amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion prevails. The chair now moves the A20 amendment as amended. Discussion. On the amendment itself, Representative Lucero.
Just to make sure that we're on the A20 as amended, is that correct?
That's correct, Representative Lucero.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So then my question is, having to scratch out what remains after taking into effect the amendment to the amendment, if I understand correctly, Section 2 still exists. Is that correct? Okay.
Representative Lucero, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So then, in regards to Section 2, as I'm reading this, the commissioner must ensure that each correctional facility inspected by the commissioner has policies and programs that preserve and protect the constitutional rights of inmates and provide adequately for inmate health and wellness. So my question to the bill author is this not already the case? Is it right now happening where the constitutional rights of inmates now, so this is not limited to immigrants, legal, illegal, this is just, it could be citizens. Are right now the constitutional rights of inmates not adequately protected?
Representative Lee.
Mr. Chair and committee members, Representative Lucero, what I can tell is that what I'm hearing from community members and like the testimony that I have read before is that one member of the community has said that her brother was in one of our facility and the staff that were working there used riot shells to corner him and inject medicine. And so this is what we're hearing on the ground from community members. And so I would sure do hope that we are working to protect the constitutional rights of the folks in our care. And this is what we're hearing. And so what we're doing with this bill is to really look at what are some of the gaps so that we could protect the constitutional rights of all people in our care. Because we are hearing that this is happening right now, today. And so this is what this bill is trying to do.
Representative Lucero, members, we have a few minutes left. We still have Representative
Thank you, Mr.
Nash,
Chair.
Novotny, and Edelson, I think a couple of others as well. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the indulgence. So the example just cited by Representative Lee, I can't discern from that if the actions that were taken were constitutional or not. It certainly could have been a very constitutional action. And so the language in this amendment, as amended, doesn't necessarily, may or may not address the example you just cited. So I'm concerned here that I'm not persuaded that due diligence has been given in the language before us, that it's not redundant to something already in statute. And if there is something already in statute, which I would be shocked if statute doesn't already require, or the Constitution require that constitutional rights be given. I'm not sure that this is a necessary verbiage in Section 2. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Lucero. Representative Costa, I'm going to jump over quickly because you've been in the system and I think you have an insight.
Just one real quick comment.
Representative
That's why we embraced Representative Johnson's amendment to this, is because we want to make sure.
And the language is focused on health and welfare. So constitutional rights in regards to health and welfare. All right, Representative Nash. And Representative Nash, let me publicly apologize to you, sir. You sent me a note, and you certainly were on the list before. I will say this, members. If members spend a lot of time making statements, what it means is that your colleagues, either side of the aisle, are not going to be able to ask their questions. We only are allotted a certain amount of time for this committee. We have public testifiers, we have bills that we have to act on. But nevertheless, sir, I apologize for not calling you earlier. Representative Nash, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the author, I wanted to address yours, line 2.7, subdivision 4A. I believe that's still in the bill, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Carver County Sheriff is a good friend of mine, and I called him when I looked at your bill. And I said, Sheriff, can you take a look at this and tell me if you're providing unequal care and treatment of the people in your facility? And he was surprised because he tells me and assures me that he has never heard of such an example. And so Representative Lee, I'm going to ask you a very direct question. Can you provide concrete examples, not heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from another, much like a 1980s song? I'm just asking for concrete examples, because if we're supposed to vote on this, and we're going to go talk about it on the floor one day, if we were to do that, I need concrete examples that you can have entered into testimony, not just hearsay. So can you please provide a concrete example or examples?
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Representative Nash, to your question, have I seen or heard it personally? No. But what we do here in this body is that we hear from our constituents. And what I'm hearing on the people who are on the ground, who are facing this, like this example right here, where we have a policy about visitation, and the community members does not know when or how they are able to access this visitation, or to make sure that this visitation program is, equitably accessed for all folks who are in the care of our community members. And so I don't deny that we, treat everyone equally, but what are we doing to ensure that folks have equitable access to the resources and to the care that we provide for them in our facilities?
And Mr. Chair.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess again to the author, we're essentially if I understand your intent here, we're going to pass a law to make sure that we're following the law. Is that correct? Because the law states that they have to provide, and I went through this with my sheriff. He told me very clearly that once somebody enters the door of the county jail, he has to treat them the same, irrespective of immigration status. We have that on the books now. But now we're going to pass an extra law to make sure that those people are treated extra special and extra fair. They already have that standard. So can you please tell me if that's what we're trying to do here?
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and, members. What we're doing here is to ensure that folks have their constitutional rights, they are being respected and they are being taken care of. And so we want to ensure that, and you have heard from the report from the DLC already. And so this is what we want to do right now, is to ensure that everyone receive equal treatment.
And Mr. Chair, very last.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think that's the problem is, as I articulated a minute ago, we have not heard a concrete example. And members, we're asked to make decisions up here, and sometimes they're hard decisions. They are. We have uncomfortable conversations, tempers get flared, but we try to base them on fact. We don't have any of that. We don't have an example. And according to the sheriff, and haven't heard that contradicted, they have to treat them the same whether they're legal or not legal status. So the bill that you're trying to move has nothing that we can use to substantiate its requests or claims. So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask for a roll call on this.
The roll call has been asked. We will have a roll call on the motion when we have motion. Wait a minute, did we adopt the amendment yet? I'm losing track. So is there a roll call on the amendment? We did adopt the amendment? All right. Roll call on the bill.
Mr. Chair, inasmuch as we have not adopted the amendment as amended,
Roll call on the
I'm going to ask for that.
Very well. There's a roll call asked for the amendment. Representative Nash, just very quickly, on this notion of whether or not we should legislate only when we hear there's a problem, it does seem to me that there is wisdom in not waiting for something wrong to happen in order for the law to expect that something right be done. In addition to that, the language here, we're talking about being real explicit about the authority of the commissioner. And so being explicit about that authority and being explicit about that authority within the context of our expectation of these constitutional rights, to me, does not seem to be a problem, but seems to be wise legislating. Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Mariani. And Representative Lee, a letter was presented from the county administrator from Sherburne County. And on a side note, I can tell you that numerous things in this letter that you presented are at best a misunderstanding, material facts. The county administrator has put out an invitation to you to tour the jail, as Representative Omar has recently done. I'd be willing to set that up for you anytime in the next couple days, and would like to accompany you with this and to show you that many of these allegations are just, at best, a misunderstanding.
Very well. Representative Lee, anything quick?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say I do welcome the opportunity to tour and visit the facility. And, for us to get a clearer picture, I would encourage if the facility is willing to let us be able to interact with the inmates that are in the facility so that we can hear both sides of the situation too. And my understanding is that, from our federal delegations who have been able to visit and tour the facility, they have been able to do that, but they have not been able to interact with some of the folks in their care. And so if that's something that we're able to do, I welcome the opportunity, and I encourage members of the committees to join us in that too.
Representative Lee, if we can fit it in, I'd like to be able to be part of that as well. Representative Novotny, thank you for that invitation. We're about to vote on the amendment. Representative Mueller, did you have something on the amendment itself? No, very well. So the roll call has been called on the E20 amendment, but that's on the bill, no? Representative Edelson, you have something on the amendment?
No, I don't. I just
No?
Mr. Chair, maybe,
So, the clerk, Representative Pinto, this
I'm
is
just-
gonna be like 5 seconds.
this will be really fast. I just want to point members to line 2.10 in the amendment that acknowledges there may be a contract that does not provide the equal treatment and says that if there is such a contract, the point is that built into this is the idea that in fact there may be situations that are not currently providing equal treatment, and so we want to make sure that they are. I guess I'll also just note that the question here is, do we have the author just present the bill that he wants? And so the second step will be, do we send the bill on? So I guess traditionally I would think that we would allow the author to present his own bill, and then folks want to vote against it as well. So that might be another reason that folks might want to vote in favor. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll.
Mariani,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Considine, Dean,
Yes.
Edelson,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Lesh, Long, Lucero,
No.
Miller, Moeller,
Yes.
Nash,
No.
O'Neill, Pinto,
Yes.
Poston, Novotny,
Yes.
go back down the line. Considine,
Please tell me what I'm voting on before I do
The
so.
amendment, sir.
No,
As amended.
yes, yes. I'm sorry, I had constituents out in the hall. Beg
Long.
your pardon.
O'Neill,
Good to ask.
and Poston. Eleven, three, three.
All right. Very well. On a vote of 11 ayes, 3 nays, and 3, what is that, not recorded?
Excused or absent.
Excused, absent. The motion does prevail. So House File 3061 as amended is before us. Representative Edelson?
Thank you, Chair. I'm disheartened by what I'm hearing today because immigrants provide such an incredible asset to our communities, wherever you are in Edina. We have farmers that benefit, our economies thrive. And Representative Lee, thank you so much for bringing this bill. There is nothing controversial about making sure that there's equal treatment and constitutional rights. Chair, I request a roll call on the bill.
Representative Edelson has requested a roll call. Any further discussion? Representative Lucero?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the remarks from Representative Edelson, I just want to reiterate my prior remarks. I completely agree. I don't know if you were out of the room when I made my comments, that I strongly believe that all people have dignity and should be treated with humanity, and in this country have constitutional rights. And so that's not in question. What I question is, I am not persuaded that the language in the bill, it's as Representative Nash highlighted, it appears to me to be duplicative or triplicative of existing statute and/or the Constitution itself. So creating a law to say you have to follow the law, it's redundancy. And so that's what's at question here in this bill and in the vote that we're about to take. It's not, a no vote doesn't represent that we don't believe constitutional rights should be applied to all. So I'm just trying to clarify that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Representative Johnson, you get the last comment or question, and then we're going to vote, members.
Representative Lee, members. I understand your pretense of this bill and why you brought it forward. I don't know if you're aware or not, I wish you would have contacted the Sherburne County Jail and found out what was going on. When people bring issues to me and there's a place for me to verify what's going on, I always do. Because now we have wasted just about an hour on this bill that is not needed. The only thing needed in here is to make sure that Department of Corrections is is inspecting their own facilities as tough as they inspect the county jails. And in fact, with the bill you're dealing at, Sherburne County and the, I can't remember the other county that houses prisoners, they go through much more rigorous federal inspection on top of it. And the inmates in the immigration side of it have a lot more privileges than our own state prisoner or county prisoners. There's no need for this bill, so I'm going to be voting no.
Representative Johnson, the chair does not believe we wasted our time here today. With that, the clerk will take the oath.
Mariani,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Considine, Dean,
Yes.
Edelson,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Johnson,
No.
Lesh, Long, Lucero,
No.
Miller,
No.
Moeller,
Yes.
Nash,
Nope.
O'Neill, oh, sorry, excused. Pinto?
Yes.
Poston? Novotny?
No.
Okay. Going down the line, Considine,
Yes.
Long, O'Neill, Poston. Okay.
Very well. On a vote of 9 ayes, 5 nays, and 3 excused, House File 3061 as amended is re-referred to the Committee on Government Operations. Representative Lee, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.